Cows Are Friends. She, her from the Netherlands wants to have a discussion on something I think Richard just knows nothing about, and that is Buddhism. Cows Are Friends, can you hear us?
Hi, Scott. Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, my pleasure. What's on your mind today?
I've talked a few times with Richard, both on the ACD After Show and through email. As a Buddhist myself, I'm very happy that someone on a show like this actually does know a bit about Buddhism, because Richard does actually know quite a bit about Buddhism. Unfortunately, you don't really get a lot of Buddhist scholars, so we don't often get to hear you talk about the subjects. So I decided to call in.
All right.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm glad Cal's a friend did call in, because she did express a little bit of nervousness, if you don't mind me saying, Cal's a friend at doing so. But I'm so glad you have called in, and I believe we were going to discuss the supernatural elements of Buddhism and Buddhist belief, because a lot of people, as we know, especially who follow Western Buddhism, don't believe that there are any supernatural elements in Buddhism. And it wouldn't be correct to say that, those Western Buddhists are not practicing Buddhism correctly, because, of course, Western Buddhism and secular Buddhism is a legitimate form of Buddhism. But to make the blanket statement that Buddhism does not contain supernatural elements is both wrong and contrary to the Buddhist scriptures. So, and I know Cal's a friend is someone who believes in the supernatural elements. And this, for me, is one of the most interesting calls that we could possibly take on this show, because it's something that we don't discuss very much anyway, Buddhism, but especially the supernatural beliefs within Buddhism. So I'm really, really interested in this. Cal's a friend. What are the kind of specific points of the supernatural that you believe within Buddhism?
So for me, I think the most important one is the fact that the Buddha was actually an enlightened being. So from that,
what do you mean by that? What does enlightenment mean in that context? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. No, that's totally fine. So in Buddhism, there's something called the cycle of rebirth, samsara. So there's this idea that we get born, we live a life, we die, we get reborn somewhere else. And this is an enormous source of suffering. And to escape that suffering, you have to break the cycle. And breaking this cycle, that is enlightenment.
So just breaking the cycle of suffering, is that supernatural?
So maybe let's dial back a little bit and talk about the terminology of supernatural here. Buddhism does hold that really everything in the universe is causal. So there is not really like something like divine intervention or miracles to intervene in the normal causal processes that the universe has. So in a sense, it could be said that there is no supernatural in Buddhism. But of course, when people use the term supernatural, generally they mean like spooky, out there stuff, like rebirth, like karma, like gods, like heavens and hells. And all of these things, they are very much in Buddhism. If these things were not in Buddhism, if there was no rebirth, if there were no other realms, if none of that was there, then the end of suffering would actually be pretty simple. Like, we would just die at some point in our life, at the end, probably, presumably, and that will be it. Suffering is over. But because there's this rebirth, suffering would not be over at the end of a life.
Richard, do you have anything to say on that?
I'm interested in your take on it, Scott, and whether you're following that, and because it can be quite a complex subject. So, as the non-Buddhist kind of in the room, if you like, not that I'm a practicing Buddhist, but I'm well read on this subject. What is your take on that?
Well, so breaking the cycle of suffering, but the cycle of suffering is caused from the rebirth. Is that right? So you keep continuing on, even at the end of this life, you start another life, and so on, and you just continue that suffering until you achieve this state of enlightenment. Are we talking about like a cognitive enlightenment, or is this like some kind of magical spiritual enlightenment, whatever that means? I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by what is meant by enlightenment. I know I've heard that phrase before. I've heard that said before, but it never really kind of sunk in what exactly was meant. What is that something that somebody could accomplish without Buddhism?
Yeah. Okay. So in Buddhism, the kind of suffering is caused ultimately by, we could, to simplify it, call it attachment. So we're attached to various things, and because of this attachment, it causes suffering. A very, very simple way of kind of demonstrating this is by saying we want to eat a cake. We have the desire to eat this cake. So we have this attachment to eating this cake. We eat this cake and we eat this cake, and we get to a point where we're satisfied. But because of our attachment to this cake and our desire to continue eating it, we continue to eating it, and then we feel really sick and we start to suffer because of it. Now, that writ large is kind of the thing that keeps us being reborn within Buddhist theology, if you like. And the end of suffering is when we become enlightened. And what enlightenment is called, what it's described as, is as if a candle has been snuffed out. That's the kind of one of the descriptions given for it. So we get to this, and there are two stages to enlightenment. So our human physical body is the result of our previous desire and our previous attachment. But of course, the Buddha became enlightened. So he still had these fetters remaining, which were the result of all this desire and attachment, even though he became enlightened. So that's the first stage of enlightenment, the realization and this kind of snuffing out process beginning, where you're no longer going to be reborn. And then at the end of his physical life, so the first stage is called Nibbana, reaching enlightenment. The second stage, when the physical body, the remaining fetters of this attachment fall away, that's called Parinibbana. And that's when everything falls away. There is no more attachment to anything. There are no more results of any of this attachment. And that's what Nirvana is. Nirvana is the release of all this attachment that we've had to things. And the processes of getting rid of that are ever more subtle within Buddhist thought. But that's kind of the what we're aiming for. We're aiming for this final release throughout all these eons, countless eons. There is no beginning of time in Buddhism. There are countless eons of these lives that go on and on and on and on until Nirvana is reached. Am I on the right lines there, Kausa friend?
I could not have said that better. That was very good.
So then the reincarnation or rebirth is that an indication that you have failed in the previous life, and that you kind of like if you don't pass second grade, you have to go back and redo it? Is that kind of what's happening here?
Yeah, in a black and white way. Yeah.
Okay.
Question here. Sorry, yeah, failure is kind of the expectation here, unfortunately. It is because we don't know what is actually happening, our ignorance of these processes, that it just keeps happening again and again. So it's actually, it's a very tragic thing in Buddhism, which is why it is so good that a Buddha comes in the world and teaches the way out.
So let's talk about these supernatural elements. So we've got to the point where we've realized that if we're following kind of scriptural Buddhist ideas, and we're holding to ideas of karma and rebirth, that there is supernatural within Buddhism, and this is something I take it you believe, Cal's friend. So what is it that convinces you that this element of Buddhism is true?
I mean, I think my answer is going to be a little bit boring. It is just fate. Like, I did not start out my journey into Buddhism being convinced of the supernatural aspects of Buddhism, what I got started with was like questions like what actually is consciousness, like what causes the body to move around, like those kinds of things. That is the sort of answers I started looking for. And reading the Buddhist scriptures and finding some answers there, and then also sort of applying techniques that are described in the Buddhist scriptures in my life and seeing that they actually help me like get over some anger issues, for example, or get over some big attachments that I had in my life. Like these things increased my confidence in the teaching and in the Buddha. And extended from that, I'm willing to extend that confidence into aspects where I cannot directly verify that it is true.
So if we take that as because I've had a similar conversation with the abbot of a Buddhist monastery, and I've had I asked him the question: if someone doesn't believe in these things, in these supernatural elements, how are they going to be convinced about them? And the answer I got from the abbot of the Buddhist monastery was, you just believe it. Kind of the Occam's razor, fake it till you make it, was the kind of paraphrase of what I got from him. So you've been convinced by certain Buddhist practices. Let's just say, for example, meditation has increased your confidence, that practicing that has made your suffering decrease. So you see some truth in the Buddhist scriptures. How do you relate that to the supernatural elements? Why does specifically things that we know are mundane increase your confidence of something that is supernatural? What are the specific elements that make that convincing for you?
I mean, I don't think there is a very direct connection in the sense of like I did something in meditation and now I believe more in the supernatural. It is that to me, Buddhism is kind of a package deal. Like there are the early Buddhist texts, they very clearly describe what is important in terms of teachings. And if for some of those I can verify very easily for myself that it's actually very helpful, and then some of it I can't, but also it's not like actively hurting me or anything, at that point I'm willing to extend some benefits of the doubt towards that.
But do you not see that occurs in other religions? How would you say that that's not the case in other religions as well? So, for example, we might say that a Christian prays. A Christian is told to pray in the Christian texts. They pray. It brings benefit to their lives by praying. It makes them more calm. It makes them more reflective. It brings benefits to their lives from doing that. And because of that, they are then convinced of the resurrection of Jesus. But you clearly don't accept the resurrection of Jesus. So what would you say is the difference? But if we're going to apply the criteria fairly across the board, what would you say the difference is between doing that within a Buddhist context and doing that within a Christian context?
So I'm afraid I will just have to special plead. Like I like Buddhism and I don't like Christianity. So if we are like going for like one principle to it, like evenly applied to other religions,
they had their chance and they blew it. So you ended up with Buddhism. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, no, I was never seriously, or I was just never a Christian. It's not like my tradition. But I think it is.
But you were saying that you feel like this is evidence to you of these. Sorry for interrupting. You were saying that you feel like these outcomes are convincing you, are telling you that there's this supernatural thing happening. What Richard was saying is that other people also make the same claim. In addition to that, many people who do not make any attachment to anything supernatural can also affect those positive changes in their life just by, sometimes it's just a change of attitude. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of action on a person's part. How do you make that last little jump into the supernatural boat?
So again, I don't think there is really anything that makes a leap. I think it is the same sort of faith that a Christian would also have in their religion, if I'm being very honest. I don't think my faith is special, like more true or more justified than that of a Christian. Maybe like the only thing I could think of is that I am very careful that I don't believe things that I believe are harmful, and that if I see that something I believe is harmful, that I try to abandon it. But maybe a Christian also does that with their faith, in which case I don't really see a difference.
Do you not think that's slightly contradictory, though, that you'll accept something or have faith in something as true that has no more justification than something else, just because you don't consider it harmful where you consider the other thing to be harmful? Don't you think that might be a problem of kind of a way of seeing the world and assessing information in the world?
It is certainly not how I would do this in any other area of my life. So again, this is because I hold Buddhism in a very special place in my mind that I'm willing to go so far for it.
Let me ask you one question here, Kauser friends. Do you actually believe that these supernatural elements are real or true? Or do you just find that if you not necessarily believe in them, but kind of lean towards them, or if you give them free reign or whatever, you kind of have faith in them? Do you find that the effects of having that belief, is that worth it for you? Or, I mean, because certainly there are true things that are harmful. I mean, I don't think you would disagree with that, would you? I mean, there are things that are true that do cause harm.
Yeah, so as for how much I believe in the supernatural things, I would definitely say that it's not even across the board. There are things in the suttas that I have much less faith in than others. For example, there is a very elaborate description of various kinds of gods in the suttas. And I think that's very interesting from sort of a religious studies historical perspective. It's not necessarily that I believe that every single god that is described there is actually a real being that exists. But when we get to something like the possibility for enlightenment or the position of karma, like I do hold that with a lot more confidence, or a lot more importance to my practice, I should say, maybe.
So you would say, or you would hold from your position, and I'm going to try and steal your money here. You would hold from your position the kind of something along the lines of school of Buddhist ethics, which is doing those things that are beneficial, you should kind of follow, and those things which aren't beneficial to the practice, to the path of practice, should be let go of. And that's the kind of, you take that attitude as well to the supernatural elements of Buddhism. Those that are said in the scriptures to relate to directly to practice, like things like karma, rebirth, nibbana. Because they relate to the path of practice, you have more conviction and faith that they are true, and the things that aren't so important to the path of practice, like kind of the descriptions of particular gods or particular supernatural powers that can be developed through meditation, according to the scriptures, you're not so concerned with those things. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes. Thank you for still manning me like that. I think that is accurate, yes.
Is that a common approach in Buddhism?
I would say so, yes. I'm sure it will depend on who you ask, but I think it is actually found in like the early Buddhist texts that this is a good approach to take.
Is there anything in the Buddhist text that you feel is harmful or that you disregard? I mean, do you cast aside the stuff that you don't like, or is the reason that you landed on Buddhism because it already kind of sums up all of your beliefs? I mean, I think it's admirable to be in favor of things that don't cause harm and that are helpful to people and that kind of thing. Is that what kind of? I guess what I'm asking is, did you end up a Buddhist because it was comfortable for you to have religious beliefs, knowing that the effects of those beliefs were positive? Do you feel like that allowed you to make that leap from being somebody who doesn't believe in supernatural to somebody who does believe in supernatural? Did that kind of give you a justification, quote unquote, to hold those beliefs?
Well, I think I already considered myself a Buddhist long before I accepted any of its supernatural aspects. And it's not that I searched out Buddhism because I was looking for something that already agreed with me. Though, I mean, I guess to some extent there was that, like the things like there not being a soul in Buddhism, there not being a creator God in Buddhism, that kind of thing really appealed to me. Like I come from a more atheist background, so there being a religion, or like as I thought of it at the time, a philosophy that said such thing was definitely appealing to me. But
how did, Council Friend, if you don't mind me interrupting, on that point, how did you kind of, because you've just said, as you know, coming from an atheist background, you didn't believe in a soul or you didn't believe in a God, a creator God specifically, and yet there is something which we could call soul adjacent in Buddhism, which is the five khandhas, which is a thing that is reborn, and there are certainly gods and supernatural beings within Buddhism, even though they're not creator gods. So how did you, when you kind of came from this system of being an atheist and having no belief in any of this, and rejecting kind of a creator God and a soul, these aspects which you didn't find that were true and you didn't find appealing, and then you come across their kind of the reflections of those in Buddhism, which were said to be true. How did you kind of approach that? We kind of hesitant at first to accept that these things were true, or was it just a case of, well, the Buddha say the scripture says these things are true, so therefore I'm going to accept that they are true until such a point where they demonstrate themselves to be true to me?
Well, so first of all, I don't think I would agree with you that the five khandhas are really soul-like. Not sure.
No, but they are adjacent to the soul. I mean, if we're going to talk about reincarnation, you know, in Hinduism, it is a soul. It is a spark of God, a soul, the Atman that is reincarnated. It is a soul. We would call it a soul. And in Buddhism, it is anatta. It is the negation of that soul. But there is still something that is reborn. There are still these clinging attributes. So we could still say that they are soul adjacent, even though we wouldn't identify them as a soul. We could still say, from the point of view of the functionality between someone who believes in Atman, something that is a soul that is reincarnated, and someone who believes in Anatman or Anatta, this idea that these clinging attributes that are reincarnated, from the perspective of the functionality of it, there is still something being reincarnated. So we could say it's soul adjacent. I think that's a fair description to have.
I mean, I would say that it is more the continuation of a process than the actually lifting of substance from one life to another. But again, I feel like we're really getting into details of what it means to be reborn in there. To maybe get to your actual question before, when I started out in Buddhism, I didn't believe any of this. I didn't believe in rebirth. I did not believe in gods or other realms or any of that stuff. I was able to ignore those things because at a service level, Buddhism really does not require you to believe any of those things. If you are just getting started or you're Buddhist spot, it is a lot more simple. Like there's a lot of the teaching that you can just apply to this single life as if there is no other life. And it's already useful. So it is because it was already useful for me at that time that I stuck with it, and that over time my faith grew to also encompass those other things.
Do you think that you were saying that it's many people don't believe in the supernatural aspects, and so you started out as an atheist? Do you think that was maybe like a bridge to where you are now, that you enjoyed it because you felt like these beliefs were positive, that they were helpful, and do you think that eventually that maybe it softened you up? Maybe it was a gateway drug, right? So you started out with some of these Buddhist beliefs, but then later on some of the supernatural aspects were added in. Do you think that's what made it attractive to you as a belief system?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair. Yes, that a lot of the things that I initially engaged with in Buddhism were very much in line with the sort of things that I believed as an atheist. So that made the transition into Buddhism easier, for sure.
Well, this is really fascinating, Kauser friends. We do have other callers piling up here, and so but I just wanted to give either you and or Richard an opportunity to make a last comment or a question, or if there's any way we want to wrap this one up.
Kauser friend.
I just want to thank you very much for taking my call, and I hope you will have a good rest of your show.